Hey guys, welcome back to Flourishing with a Facial Difference. My name is Brooke, and today's episode is all about my very first relationship and what it was like to start dating while having a facial difference. So first things first, you guys just heard my new jingle for the podcast. I really love it. And the person that I have to thank for that is my boyfriend's sister, Elaine. She is a music therapist at Personal Counseling Service here in Southern Indiana, and she is incredible at what she does. She's the director, and she has come so far in her career. And I am so proud of her, and I am so thankful that she made me this jingle. It's everything that I could have asked for, and I think that it fits perfectly with my podcast. So thank you so much, Elaine. I love it. And it really does make me feel like I have an official podcast, and I hope that you all enjoy it as well. A second thing that I want to talk about before we get into this podcast is about my new microphone. I'm so excited to say that I have a brand new microphone. It's a Blue Yeti, and it's perfect. I love it so much. I don't know if you can tell the quality difference, but I can definitely tell. I'm so happy with it, and I want to thank my dad and my stepmom for gifting me this microphone. I had planned on getting my own at some point, but I went to go visit them over the past weekend, and they just wanted to buy me a microphone, and I'm very thankful to that. Thank you guys so much. I love it. Now, let's get started in this episode. First, I want to talk about my high school experience, because I did not start dating until the very end of my senior year of high school. I was about to be 18 years old. I had no interest in dating. I didn't care about it. Boys were not on my radar. Obviously, I was boy crazy. I had so many crushes, but I had no care to have a boyfriend. It didn't bother me. It just wasn't something I necessarily cared about or something that I needed to have in my life. So, my high school experience was absolutely incredible. I didn't worry about boys. I had the most amazing friends. I truly did have the best high school experience, and I'm so thankful for that, because a lot of people who have differences, whether they have mental differences or physical differences, they get treated poorly, and that's a very big stigma on being someone who was born different. But thankfully, I had a great high school experience. I was not once bullied. And if I was bullied, I had no idea. So that's something I'm very glad to say. I had so many friends. I had a very large friend group. And I was also a chameleon, because I had friends in several different cliques, I guess you could say. So that's one reason why it was a little bit hard for me to figure out who I was in high school, just because I had so many different kinds of friends all over the spectrum, and I kind of molded myself to fit each friend group. So, my high school boyfriend, let's get into that. I was about to be 18, and again, boys were not on my radar at all. I could care less if I had a boyfriend or not, and my friends didn't make me feel left out. Like, if one of my friends had a boyfriend, well then I pretty much had a boyfriend too. We did everything together, and nobody made me feel excluded. I want to keep my high school boyfriend's identity anonymous, just for his protection and his privacy. So for the sake of this podcast, we're going to give him a fake name, and let's make it Mason. So, I didn't know Mason until my senior year of high school, and he ended up being in one of my classes. He was in my debate class, and there was only like 4 or 5 people in that class. It was a very small class. I met him, and I mean, he was just a normal guy. I didn't think anything of him. We talked, but only because there was literally 5 people in that class, so you almost had no choice but to talk to everyone, really. Plus, it was debate class, so there was a lot of conversation going on, and him and I were pretty casual. I mean, I wouldn't say we were friends, but I wouldn't say that we didn't know each other. Mason and I had a very different kind of relationship as far as classmates goes. We didn't like each other, but we didn't hate each other. We didn't agree on very much at all. And honestly, I didn't have any attraction to him. I didn't get the vibe that he was attracted to me. And pretty much the whole first semester, we just kept it strictly classmates. So then prom time rolled around. My mom bought me the most amazing prom dress. I still have it hanging up back at my mom's house in her closet. I'm obsessed with it. I would love the opportunity to wear my prom dress again, but for now, it's sitting in a dust bag. It all started with my mom telling me that my dress was so beautiful, but it was such a shame that I didn't have a prom date. It wasn't something that I necessarily worried about, but she was right. I really wanted the full prom experience. So I couldn't think of any guy to ask other than Mason. I don't know why he popped in my head, but I remember being at work and I texted him and I said, "Hey, are you going to prom?" And he said, "No. Why do you ask?" And I said, "Well, I was going to say, if you were going to prom, maybe we could go together." And he was like, "Oh, absolutely. Let's do it. Let's go to prom together." I was like, "Okay, great." I remember I was sitting in class with one of my best guy friends, Chance, and I don't know, I just felt like since I was going to prom with Mason, maybe we should take it a step further. Mind you, I have never once flirted with a man. I've never once flirted with a boy. I never initiated anything. I don't think I've ever even been hit on before at this point. But I got a wild hair. I talked to Chance a lot about it, and he suggested that I go for it, and so I asked Mason out. I texted him while in class, and I said, "Hey, since you and I are going to prom together, I feel like it would make sense for us to start hanging out a little bit before prom." So I asked him out, and we went to the movies. I absolutely hated the fact that I asked him out to a movie because the movies on a first date is the absolute worst. I told myself from then on I would never make that mistake again, but it was so awkward for me. I don't know why. Maybe it was first date jitters, but I really didn't like being on a date at the movies for the first time, my very first date ever. It wasn't something I would ever recommend doing. I remember he tried to hold my hand during the movie, and again, you guys, this is my very first date. I had no idea what I was doing, and I held his hand so awkwardly, and it was just so uncomfortable. And plus, the movie that we saw was not a movie that I was necessarily interested in, so I was pretty bored. I was sitting there the entire movie just going over in my head how awkward I was. So the movie ended, and we ended up sitting in the movie theater parking lot for hours just talking, and we hugged after, and then the next day in class, we just started talking more. We started going out on little tiny dates, and then I think it was our 3rd or 4th date or hangout or whatever you want to call it. We went to the park, and we had Subway sandwiches, and we sat outside. And we walked back to the car, and he had written, "Will you be my girlfriend?" in car marker on the car. I thought that was so thoughtful, so creative, so incredible, and my heart skipped a beat because I had never been asked to be someone's girlfriend before. I never thought that was something that would happen for me because of the way that I look, and I know that's very pessimistic thinking, but because I was 18 at this point and it had never happened yet, I genuinely felt like something was wrong with me and that no boy would ever give me attention because I have a facial difference. But I was proved wrong. We started dating on April 13th of 2014, and things were going really well. It was a relatively perfect relationship. He spoiled me, he treated me like a princess. He was an incredible boyfriend, and I am so thankful that my very first relationship was something so normal. The one complaint that I have about our relationship is the fact that we never talked on a personal level. I never opened up about my disabilities. I never told him about my limitations. I never told him about my medical history or my background or why I looked different, and he never asked. We never had that talk, so I never felt fully myself. But since it was my first relationship, I didn't really care. I was too afraid to bring up any serious topic because I didn't want to risk messing it up. Mason and I did absolutely everything together. We were together all the time. I hung out with him until he had to go to work. We met a few minutes before school and just sat in each other's cars and talked. We tried to see each other at school every chance we got. We were inseparable. We were the typical high school couple. And then prom rolled around. Prom was awesome. And being at prom with a boyfriend was even more awesome, especially because he liked me so much. So later into our relationship, Mason ended up telling me that he loved me. And when I heard that, no matter how good it feels to feel loved, I just didn't feel it back. There was something inside of me that hearing someone say they loved me felt really good, but it didn't give me butterflies. It more so just told me that I'm lovable, rather than I found the person that I also love. And yes, I know, who really knows what love is in high school? I didn't, because I had no experience, and I just feel like when you love someone, you feel it. But of course, I said it back. But did I mean it? No. I didn't find out what love was until way after high school. But of course I said it back. And that is something that I don't necessarily regret, but I wish I hadn't lied. I wish I had said, we should wait. Because soon after we did break up. Our breakup was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. Not because it hurt, but because I was a person that I did not like. I broke up with him, and I was awful. It was a couple of months after him and I had started dating, and that day I acted like nothing was wrong. I was completely normal, and he had no reason to think that I was going to break up with him. Even I didn't know that I was going to break up with him shortly after. Because why would I want to break up with somebody that chose to be with me the way that I look? But something in my gut told me that there was more out there, that I shouldn't settle, and that I should be with someone that I care about in return. Because this was my very first relationship, breaking up with someone was not something I had any knowledge about at all. I didn't want to do it wrong, but I didn't know how to do it at all. I remember I was sitting in class with one of my best friends, Chance, and I told him, I said, I just don't feel that connection. I don't think that we're compatible. So he had the idea to make a pro and con list on the dry erase board in class, and he wrote everything down, and I just basically thought of the pros and cons about my relationship. There were so many cons on the con side. Some of the cons were, I don't feel a connection. I don't think that we are compatible. I don't think that I love him. I don't think that I like him nearly as much as he likes me. I don't think that we have the same personality. And there were a few other cons, but those are just very superficial. And I had no right to be superficial or judgmental or anything, especially the way that I look. But the only thing that I could put on the pro side was that he liked me. And that's when Chance looked at me and he said, "Do you really think that you should stay in a relationship with someone just because they like you? Don't you think it's important for you to like them back?" And I thought, wow, you're absolutely right. So right then and there, over text, which is something that I would never do now, but I broke up with him. He didn't see it coming, and he was devastated. I feel so awful with how I handled it because right after I sent that text, I blocked him on everything. I deleted all of our photos because I'm the kind of person, when I make a decision, I act on it. I don't think about it. I'm very impulsive. And the thought of having pictures up of someone who wasn't my boyfriend anymore, I just didn't like that. Now, I definitely do things a little bit differently, but Brooke in high school, she had no idea what she was doing. I broke up with him with 2 days left of the school year. I probably should have waited until summer so I wouldn't have to run into him again, and so that he wouldn't have to see someone who broke his heart throughout the hallways. But like I said, when I have a thought in my mind, I act on it right away. I'm very impulsive. After we broke up, we never talked again. We cut all ties, and I had a really great summer. It was the summer before my freshman year of college. I was moving away from home. I was going to be independent. I was so excited to start the rest of my life. Then freshman year of college rolls around, and it's in the fall, which is obviously cuddle season. I was in a new environment, surrounded by so many couples, and I felt this overwhelming feeling of just loneliness. So, the only guy that I knew that was interested in me in one point was Mason. So, what did I do? I hit him up. I texted him after months of no communication. We were 4 hours apart at totally different universities, and we just started talking. We talked every day, all day, for weeks. And it wasn't necessarily flirty. It was just, normal friend talk. I apologized for the breakup. I explained myself. We caught up on each other's lives. I wanted to know how his college was going. He wanted to know how my semester was going. And it was really nice to have a friend, and a male friend, that I could have if I wanted. But that's the thing, is I didn't want him. After talking for a few weeks, he asked me out. And I felt so bad for reaching out to him, knowing that this would probably happen, and I had to shut him down again. I told him, "I'm sorry, I just don't like you that way," and I genuinely feel like I led him on, and I felt so awful. So we cut ties again after me breaking his heart for the second time, and we didn't speak. I thought about Mason a lot. I thought about how awful I was to him, and how he was so open-minded and he was so caring. Mason was the perfect boyfriend. He was so kind to me. He catered to my every needs. He was my first kiss. He was my first date. He was my first boyfriend. He was my first everything. And I treated him so poorly. And after Mason, I dated a lot. It's almost like dating Mason was something that I needed to start dating. After him, I dated so many boys, and again, that's the reason why I want to make a series all about dating with a facial difference, because I've been around the block, okay? I think dating is so much fun, And while I'm in a long-term, very committed relationship right now, back then I loved dating. It was like a hobby. Meeting new people, figuring out what you want in life was something I was all about. But we'll get into that in the upcoming episodes, all about dating, because you guys, I have a lot of experience, and I'm excited to share that. 2 years went by, and I never heard a thing from Mason. I somewhat kept up with him on Facebook. I know he was in a very long-term relationship, and he's not really a social media kind of person, so I really didn't know what was going on in his life. I do know that he was still in school. I remember it was my junior year of college, and I was sitting in the hallway waiting for my French class to start, and I got this just overwhelming feeling of guilt. Call it God, call it my conscience, call it whatever you want, but I was flooded with emotions all about how poorly I treated Mason. It was 2 years after the breakup, and I just felt like the worst person in the world. And I really needed him to know that I wasn't that person anymore. I didn't like the fact that there was someone out in the world who saw me as this awful person who didn't care about their feelings, and that's exactly what I was. But I had changed. I had had more experience, and I realized that that's not how you treat people. So I sent Mason a Facebook message. It was very long, and it was very heartfelt, and it basically just said that I was sorry. I told him that he was my first everything, and that I didn't know how to handle it, and that he did absolutely nothing wrong. It was me and not him. I broke up with him because I didn't think that he was my future. And I was right, but I went about it in all the wrong ways. There's not really a handbook on how to date, especially when you have a facial difference. It's almost like they're totally different rules, but in reality they're not. And I explained to him that I was so proud of him for staying in school, for having a beautiful relationship from what I could tell on Facebook, and that if I could change things, I would change the way that I handled the breakup. And surprisingly enough, he messaged me back and he said, "Wow, I pretty much hated you up until this very moment, and I'm really glad that you reached out." He said that he had no hard feelings, that he understood, and that I was right, we just weren't meant to be. He wished me well, and that was the last time I heard from him. I think about my first relationship a lot because it really did teach me what I do and what I don't want in a relationship. It showed me that I'm capable of breaking someone's heart, which is something I never thought for myself. I never thought that me, born with Pfeiffer syndrome, living life with a facial difference, had the ability to hurt someone else emotionally. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life being the one who was always getting hurt. Now, granted, I did get hurt a lot, and I did continue to hurt people a lot, but that's pretty much inevitable. Majority of breakups are one-sided, and someone has to do it, right? But something that I am proud of myself for doing is being the one that put myself out there. It's almost like I didn't acknowledge that I had a facial difference, and I just went for it. And that is one big takeaway that I had from my first relationship, was I made that happen. I asked him out. And it was one of the best decisions that I ever made, because truly he was a great first boyfriend. I had nothing negative to say about him. We just weren't meant to be. And that's totally okay. But it is really nice having memories of a first relationship and them being so wonderful. I hope that he's doing well. And I hope that he's happy, because he truly does deserve that. I'm happy. And I think that things worked out the way that they were supposed to. I hope that there's someone out there listening to this podcast who's afraid to go for it. Let me tell you, just do it. If you like the guy, if you like the girl, ask them out. The worst thing that could happen is they could say no. But you don't know if you don't try. Thank you guys so much for listening. I want to give a little bit of self-promo. Don't forget to go follow me on SoundCloud and Spotify. Go like my Facebook page, Flourishing with a Facial Difference. I'm also on YouTube if you prefer that way. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Flourishing with a Facial Difference.